Welcome to Rogers TV and the local campaign. My name is Sean Ferfaro, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's candidates debate for the riding of Kitchener-Conestoga. We have the upcoming provincial election, and we are pleased to have four of the candidates in Kitchener-Conestoga joining us today. So I'll introduce them alphabetically from left to right in our Rogers TV studio here. Representing the Liberal Party of Ontario, Joe Gowing. From the New Blue Party, Jim Karahalios. From the Ontario New Democratic Party, Jody Szymanski. And representing the Green Party of Ontario, Braden Wagner. Also appearing on the ballot for Kitchener-Conestoga, but not present with us in the studio today, from the Ontario Party, Patrick Doucette, and from the PC Party of Ontario, Mike Harris. Now, the rules for today's debate are as follows. In a moment, I'm going to give each of the four of you 1 minute each for your opening remarks to address anything you would like off the top for 1 minute. After that, we'll proceed to our Q&A round. I have some prepared questions for you. For each of those questions, all four of you will be given the opportunity to answer. We'll alternate the order from left to right depending on who started the previous question. 1 minute for each of those answers. Direct rebuttals will be offered if you've addressed another candidate, and I will give them an opportunity to respond 30 seconds maximum if needed. Only direct rebuttals will be awarded, not 30 seconds extra speaking time. We'll leave about 5 minutes at the end of this for closing statements, and you'll each have the opportunity for a closing statement, 1 minute each. We would ask you all to please adhere to the guidelines with regards to the time allotment, and please don't speak when any of the other candidates are speaking. So let's have an important and lively debate today. On to the opening statements, and we will begin with you, Joe Gowing.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Gowing. I'm running for MPP in Kitchener-Conestoga. I'm a lifelong Region of Waterloo resident, born and raised in Cambridge, moved to Kitchener area of our riding 15 years ago. My background is in finance. I believe that we need to be fiscally responsible, but we also need to make sure that we're taking care of everyone. There's a balance that we need to find, and the government of the day has not been finding that at all. One thing that I will do is show up, regardless of whether it is a bad thing, if a negative, a good thing, I will be there. I plan to make sure that I'm available for anyone in our riding, regardless of your political stripe. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, your opening statements.
My name is Jim Karahalios, and I'm the New Blue Party candidate for the riding of Kitchener-Conestoga. I also happen to be the leader of the New Blue Party, mainly because the other person who founded the party with me, my wife Belinda, the former MPP for Cambridge, she didn't want the job. So that's how I got the job. This is the second election for the New Blue Party. The party was founded prior to the 2022 election with the sole purpose to clean house at Queen's Park of the lobbyists and the political cronies that have taken it over. And after one election, we became Ontario's fifth largest party with 127,000 votes, which is the most any party's received in their first election in Ontario since 1934. This time we have 108 candidates, and I'm one of those 108. When I'm not campaigning, I'm a lawyer with an undergrad and master's in engineering, but my favorite job is being a husband to Belinda and a father to our son Victor, where I spend as much time coaching and playing hockey and baseball with him as I can.
Thank you, Jim. And opening statements from Jody.
Thank you, Sean. My name is Jody Szymanski. I have grown up in Waterloo Region. I've lived here since I was 2. Moved to Kitchener when I was married, and then 15 years ago moved to Wellesley Township. I think I bring a unique perspective because I've lived in both Kitchener and in the townships, which there are some differences and lots of similarities. The reason I decided to run is because I was tired of looking at the healthcare system, the way it's falling apart. It's been underfunded for far too long. My husband and I both work in the educational sector, so we see what's happening there every single day. And for me, the tipping point is what's happening to the farmers in Wilmot. The expropriation of land that has been hid behind secret doors. And I just think that those people deserve answers, and they deserve not to have their land taken away. I think, you know, it's important to have your back. I'm here to listen and show up for you every day.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden, from the Green Party, your opening statement.
My name is Braden Wagner. I am the MPP candidate for the Green Party. The main thing I kind of want to say is, you know, let my hoodie be a symbol of the approach that I'm taking to politics. our system has been at a fundamental level broken for generations. I see this firsthand as someone who's grown up in this system and is in the generation that is struggling to get by, struggling even with my own business, even with the career that I've built, make it in this current system, be able to afford housing, be able to just afford, living conditions that everyone has a right to have. I got into this because somebody needs to do something different and somebody needs to actually make tangible change.
Thank you, Braden. Thank you all four of you for your opening statements. We'll proceed to the Q&A round. I'll pose a question to each of you, and we will take turns answering. Jim, you'll answer our first question. My first question is short and sweet and simple. Maybe not simple. What is the most pressing issue facing Kitchener-Conestoga right now, and how do you plan to address it?
Kitchener-Conestoga needs an MPP who's going to be their spokesperson and representative at Queen's Park, not a mouthpiece for the leader, or even worse with Doug Ford, for the lobbyist running the leader in Kitchener-Conestoga. And for the last 6 years, we've had an MPP who's a nice guy when you meet him, but he's nowhere to be found and he's not standing up for his constituents. One of the main pressing issues is expropriation. You would think with a PC MPP, you'd have someone there standing up for property rights. Instead, you've got a PC government and an MPP in Kitchener-Conestoga who are silent, who are not respecting property rights, and who are not fighting on the values and principles that got them elected, because they've betrayed their voters and betrayed their constituents in Kitchener-Conestoga.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody, the most pressing issue facing Kitchener-Conestoga?
I think the most pressing issue is the lack of transparency. As has been said, Harris Jr. does not show up. He does not answer emails. He does not answer phone calls. He has been ignoring the farmers. This morning on CBC, he mentioned that, things are going better between the farmers in the region. I don't know what farmers he's talking to because I'm speaking with them daily, and that is not the case. He also mentioned that Schneider's did not stay here, and we lost a lot of jobs because there was no shovel-ready land. The land that they did purchase was only 50 to 75 acres. There was lots of that here in town. And so there was lots of opportunity for Schneider's. It was not the fact that we did not have shovel-ready land. So I think people need someone who's there for them, that's going to stand up for them and be honest.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden?
I think, similar points in terms of, I definitely lean in the direction of transparency being one of the main issues. I talked to especially business owners in Kitchener-Conestoga, and they feel like they are part of the greater Waterloo region, but only on paper, because it doesn't feel like they're getting the attention that the rest of the region gets from our government, especially when their current representative is actually physically never around. I think that what Kitchener-Conestoga needs and what a lot of Waterloo region needs is a government and representation that's going to be transparent with them, and not only transparent, but build out a system to actually allow for direct communication, allow for that reciprocal communication, and be able to show the progress they're making. I mean, the ability for someone to just say, no, actually, we should build on farmland because great industries could be here, it's just out of touch.
Thank you, Braden. And Joe?
Definitely it would be the Wilmot Assembly. I am totally opposed to it after hearing countless people talk about it, the farmers themselves, meeting with the groups that are in town. He is out of touch. I spoke with one constituent, and she was a PC voter for 70 years. And what she said to me was she needed the provincial government and she needed her representative. She contacted his office 4 times and they never got back to him. All of a sudden, the election's called, phone call for a donation. That's not the way you should represent. You need to be, and I will be, the voice of Kitchener-Conestoga at Queen's Park.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the 4 of you for answering our first question in the Q&A round. I will mention, since you all have mentioned this, that PC Party of Ontario candidate Mike Harris was invited to participate in this debate, and despite being at another debate that all 4 of these participants were in this morning, he has declined the opportunity to join them here on Rogers TV. I am hearing about the Wilmot Land Assembly. So let's talk about that next. And Jody, you'll be first on this question. Simply put, how would you and your party address the ongoing Wilmot Land Assembly issue?
So Marit Stiles, her first tour stop was at one of the farms that's affected by this land grab. And at first, the farmers weren't happy with her response. Before she came back to Waterloo Region for the Chamber Series, I talked to her, Catherine Fife talked to her, and Catherine's been involved in this right from the beginning. We said that we need to come out stronger. So the platform now says that we will stop the expropriation and we will protect all prime agricultural land in Ontario. I think this is incredibly important. And Marit does too. She's actually coming back to the riding tomorrow to canvass with me. This is, not only is it inappropriate to take away somebody's property, but to do it with all the secrecy and the non-disclosure agreements, those would be eradicated so that people can actually find out what's happening to their land, who's going to be on their land, and what studies they did about other possible land uses.
Thank you, Jody. Same question, Braden.
What's great about the Green Party, and a big reason why I joined it, was there are very passionate people who have been part of these communities for decades that have taken up the initiative of representing these communities that don't come from a background of politics, and they're not doing it for the benefits that comes with your post-political reign and what that might lead to. People like Mike Schreiner genuinely care about making a difference, and you can see it when you go and you read the GPO platform and you read the solutions to these problems. They lay it out. They lay out budgets. They lay out everything you need to know, and a lot of parties don't do that. They don't put in that work to be that transparent with the constituents. This problem, I mean, I said it this morning when Mike Harris was in front of me, to look at this region, to look at Kitchener-Conestoga and claim that the only good place to build industry is on top of these farmers' land is bad faith.
Thank you, Braden. Same question for you, Joe.
Absolutely. 0.5% of Canadian farmland is Class 1 farmland. 0.5, half of that is in Southern Ontario. 0.5%, not even 1% of farmland is Class 1 farmland. Half of that is in Ontario. This morning, we heard that there's going to be 30,000 jobs created from this site. That leads me to a couple things. How do you know how many jobs? Why the secrecy? Why the NDAs? If you don't know who's coming, how do you know how many people are going to get jobs from this? On the flip side to that, they're not talking about who's losing jobs. The agri-food industry in our province contributes billions and billions of dollars every year to our GDP. Taking this land away would be detrimental to that industry.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, how would you and the New Blue Party address this issue?
The number one way to fight back on expropriation is we need to change provincial laws to respect property rights. One of the tragedies when the Charter was enshrined in Canada is that property rights were deliberately excluded because of Liberal and NDP politicians and Conservative politicians who allowed that to happen. I went to a Wilmot Civic Action meeting recently last week, and they were against the expropriation, but the presenters there had their own version of expropriation, which is to turn that farmland into protected green space. That's not respecting property rights, and I hope my colleagues here would not be in favor of a different form of expropriation. We need to defend and protect property rights.
Thank you, Jim. And I think we could all agree that 1 minute each perhaps is not enough to address this issue. So a follow-up question on the Wilmot Land Assembly, and Braden, I'll start with you on this. How would you propose to strike that balance between A, protecting Waterloo's farmland, and B, still growing local industries and economic opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, my main issue is with a lot of political parties that exist, this is not new problems. A lot of these problems have existed for generations. I mean, I may only be 30 years old, but I've seen these problems persist as I've grown up in Ontario. So to think that all of a sudden magically the people that have been given the chance to already fix this will all of a sudden turn around and do so, I think is precisely the reason these messes continue to proliferate each year as time passes. I think there's a lot of approaches we can take. The truth is, I'm not an expert in so many of these areas, and I would rely on the experts that understand this stuff better than myself to give me those potential solutions that really truly does benefit the majority of people. But most importantly, it has to be approached from the perspective of making sure that these farmers still have land to cultivate, and making sure that jobs and housing and everything that needs to be accompanied with that are also thought of.
Thank you. And Joe, how would you strike that balance?
Well, I would look at another location for this specific site. One of the other things I would do is the process needs to be followed that's transparent and has public consultation. Having NDAs, I would lift those NDAs right off the bat to find out what exactly happened. What did the regional council and the township council knows? What do they know? What happened? Why are we in this situation? We have another location that is similar in size, if not bigger than this, between that's already classified as industry between Cambridge and Ayr. Why this specific site? Is it because that our new Minister of Red Tape Reduction had somebody call him and say, I got money, what do you got? That's essentially what his new title is.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, you're going to be next, but before you answer, we inadvertently put 30 seconds on the clock for you last time, and thank you for still adhering to the time, but we're going to give you 90 seconds to answer this if you would like.
I think, number one, the objectives of regional council, whether you call it regional economic development or whatever fancy term they want to give it, should never trump the property rights of a property owner. That's priority number one. So earlier I was mentioning we've got to open up the Expropriation Act, the Planning Act, and put in provisions in there that protect property rights. The second problem that we're seeing with the PC government right now is land development is favored to big corporate, big development, big land developers, and to the detriment of smaller development, because the process is so expensive, and the Ford PC government has created a process and changed a process to make it so that only large-scale projects are the ones that are economically feasible. The New Blue Party, in addition to favoring property rights, is also in favor of small business. And so we've got to make it desirable for smaller scale projects to be built, not just mega projects. And lastly, if the developers want a mega project, they should buy the land for what the owner of the land wants to sell it. And if they don't want to sell it for the price being offered, it should not be up for expropriation. They should find another piece of land to go build their project.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody, how would you strike the balance?
This whole process has pitted industry against farming. And farming is an industry, and these are family businesses. And I think that if we had done the proper process, that we could have easily struck this balance by making sure that A, the public wants it, people want to sell, and if they don't, move on to the next space. We don't actually know if they've done any other research on any other land because NDAs. So I think that we do need jobs. We do need expansion, but it's got to be within the urban areas and areas that are not prime farmland. We're losing 319 acres a day under Ford of farmland. And you know, with what's happening in the States, we need to figure out how we're going to feed ourselves, and losing all our agricultural land is not a great way to do that.
Thank you to all four of you for your thoughtful and difficult sometimes answers to that question. We're going to move on to access to health care as a topic. And Joe, we'll start with you on this question. As of July 2024, 2.5 million Ontarians did not have a family doctor. How would you increase access to healthcare professionals in this community?
So I'm going to break that down. In Kitchener-Conestoga, it's 15,390 that do not have a family doctor. One of the things we're going to do is recruit more. We're going to invest in more doctors in education. We're going to expand the medical schools in Ontario. We're going to deliver a team-based care with evening and weekend support, because not everybody is a 9 to 5 and you can't get in to see your doctor. We are going to stop penalizing people for going to walk-in clinics. It doesn't make sense. We are going to add an addition, at least 1,200 qualified and experienced international trained doctors over the next 4 years. We're going to eliminate the use of fax machines. We're still living in the Stone Ages. We have internet, we have email, we can do that. We're going to incentivize family doctors and nurses that have went overseas for training that are still there to come back home.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, same question for you.
Well, I have personal experience with our healthcare system, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm a survivor of osteosarcoma, and largely I'm standing here on two legs because of the healthcare system. They were able to salvage my right leg after 3 major surgeries, 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and now I'm back to full strength, skating again with my son and coaching and playing with him baseball and hockey. So I owe a lot to the healthcare system, but we need a healthcare system that responds not only to those that have devastating or near life ending illnesses. We need to invest in healthcare that identifies early prognosis and gets ahead of the issue. And the other thing we need is a guarantee on wait times and to provide people with option for other services when that guarantee is not met. I have personal experience. The New Blue takes the healthcare sector very serious, and it's a top priority for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody, how would you increase access to healthcare professionals?
I agree that we need to recruit more doctors, but to do that, we have to make it something that people want to do again. And same goes for more nurses. And so we need to help them cut the red tape, make a centralized database of referrals. I've heard from the OMA chair that they spend about 20 hours a week just looking for referrals to send their patients to. If there was a centralized system, we'd be able to do that. By building bigger health teams, we can see more patients and get more people through. I think if everyone has a family doctor, we're not clogging our emergency rooms with non-emergencies because these poor folks have nowhere else to go. And so by investing $4.1 million in the next 4 years, we would do that. We would also, something our Minister of Red Tape is not doing is making sure that we're removing red tape. So a lot of internationally trained doctors are ready and available, but they need to go through all this bureaucracy. So let's help them do their jobs more quickly to help the folks on the ground.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden, on the topic of increasing access to healthcare.
Through my work, I've been luckily able to actually see a lot of behind the scenes in hospitals in this region. I've been able to cover stories and look at what the doctors, surgeons, specialists are dealing with in our hospitals. The solution is clear to them. It's that they're being underpaid, and the amount of time and energy and work that it takes to get into this profession to be met with a broken system that not only underpays but overworks these people. I talked to a nurse this morning who came all the way from Kitchener-Conestoga to Ashland's office where I was to talk to me about what he's been dealing with and the struggles that he has as a nurse in our healthcare system. I think it's great that we have a partially socialized healthcare system. I think it's amazing, but we need to just get to the brass tacks of paying these people better because they're the foundation of our society.
Thank you all for your answers to that question. Still under the banner of healthcare, under the sub-banner of, or equally important banner, in my opinion, community mental health. Mental health is a growing concern, and access to resources can be fraught with lengthy delays. How will your party ensure that those in need of mental health supports have both access to services and the ability to find out how to access them? And Jim, we'll start with you.
Primary driver of mental health issues, twofold. Number one, having a stable family and a good home to come back to and to depend on and rely on. And I think the number one driver of that is to help strengthen families, and respecting parents as first educators of their children is the number one goal that the New Blue Party has that will directly combat the rising mental health challenge. Number two is, with the cost of living going up, overtaxation, harder and harder to make ends meet, both parents having to work overtime to put food on the table and pay the rent, those are all drivers of mental health crisis that we have in Ontario right now. And we need tax relief badly. We need someone to balance the budget, and we need to make living in Ontario affordable again for parents and their children so that they have more time to spend with their children and there's less of a need to access mental health care professionals in the long run.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody.
I think that we need to make sure that we're building these community health teams. Our family doctors cannot handle everything. But if they have teams of nurse practitioners, nurses, mental health professionals, I think that we can get people the access they need more quickly. We also have 30,000 children on a waiting list in schools right now, waiting for mental health support. And it's causing stress on the school systems. It's causing violence in the schools. I've been speaking with elementary school teachers who are getting chairs thrown at them, bitten. And a lot of these things are stemming from mental health, and these kids are our future. And so I think we really need to focus on making sure that we invest in mental health, that we protect it, but also protect workers so that they're not getting burnt out, and so that they need less time off of work just because of the mental stress of their jobs.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden.
This is a process of improving education, improving messaging, improving knowledge that's out there for people to understand the mental health issues that they might be dealing with. It's very easy to say that if you have a perfect little family that all of a sudden you will not have mental health issues, but that's not how mental health works. And especially because if you frame it in this direction of, well, if mom and dad have great jobs and support the household, everybody will be okay. Well, with my single mother who didn't have another person supporting the financial household, I don't know if that impacted the fact that I went undiagnosed with ADHD most of my life. And trust me, being able to go through that process, even though it's a bit convoluted right now and I had to really advocate for myself, which Canadians shouldn't have to do, the support should be there, it changed my life, being able to get that support. So I don't want people downplaying it.
Thank you, Braden. And final answer will come from Joe.
We need to invest in our mental health sector of healthcare. There is a lot of people out there struggling. My wife works for an agency in Waterloo. She's the administrator there, and they constantly get calls from people that are needing the help. They're in there trying to get the help. They just don't have enough people to be able to do it. Education system is the same thing. There's young people that are abandoned by our education system. One of the things that we are going to do is put the education system at the core of our economic plan, because if we can get people out of poverty and into better paying jobs, I know it's been said that that doesn't help, but it does. It does. If people can live healthy lives, that will help with their mental health.
Thank you, Joe. We will move on to our next question. The category now, I'm calling this voter disengagement. Some call it voter apathy. I'll say voter disengagement. It is becoming a growing concern. What do you say to the voters in the Kitchener-Conestoga riding who may be reluctant to vote because they feel that their vote doesn't matter? And Jody, I'll ask you first.
Sean, we're definitely hearing this when we're knocking on doors. A lot of people saying it doesn't matter, it's not going to change, it's going to be the same everywhere you go. And I have managed to convince quite a few people that it does matter and their vote does matter. I think it's helping some people to understand what government can do and what they can't, and which different levels of government. And just talking to them and giving them a sense of hope that, you know, if there are people out there to fight for them, and there are, I'm one of them, then, you know, it gives them hope that someone will push for change. I'm a big believer in collaboration. I work in an organization that can seem very siloed at times, and I've always been able to convince people to share resources, to work together so that we can make a better life for all.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden, voter disengagement.
Yes, this has been nothing but a failure of the past decades of governments putting no time and energy into messaging and creating systems to actually engage Canadians in the democratic process. In a lot of ways, it's actually by design. The less people who are engaged in the democratic process, the less noise there is in terms of the actual problems people have. Personally, my approach to all things, including politics, is creating very accessible and transparent systems. And furthering the ability for somebody to get involved in politics, whether it be local or provincially or even on a national level. The fact that people are only asked once every few years to just check a box of somebody's name is ridiculous. That's not a democratic process. They have no insight onto what's actually happening. They have no say, and that's what needs to change fundamentally.
Thank you, Braden. And Joe, how would you handle the topic of voter disengagement?
Look at the past history of voting. There is ridings that are within hundreds of people of votes. There is, in our riding, there is a split of 2,000. We had about under 50% turnout in the last election. If those people would have voted, we probably would have had a different outcome than what we did. And that's what I'm asking for this time, is to put your vote where you want change. If you want change, I'm definitely the voice for you in this riding. And it's resonating with people. When I stop at doors, there was one guy, he says to me, he goes, "Oh, you're liberal?" "Yeah, I'm not going to do that." After talking with me for about 10 minutes, he put a lawn sign, or excuse me, snowbank sign on. But the other side to that is what we are in right now. We are in a winter election. People are gone. We had a great opportunity to wait the 18 months and have a great time to be able to do this with the nice weather, and here we are.
And Jim.
Ontario voters are not voting because regardless of whether you're getting the NDP, the Liberals, or the PC, it's the same old every time. Scandals, cronyism, the lobbyists are running the show. And there's no way in the establishment parties to make a difference, especially in Doug Ford's PC party. In the PC party, they just appoint their candidates now, the way Michael Harris was appointed. There's no more elections to choose your local candidate for the PC party. And if you're a voter on the left, you have 3 parties to vote for, the Greens, the Liberals, or the NDP. If you're a voter on the right, there's no party to vote for. Not only are the PCs not conservative, they also don't respect local democracy. That's why the New Blue Party was created, so people have an option to get involved, to make a difference, to fight for property rights, to fight for parents as first educators of their children and lower taxes, and to clean house at Queen's Park, to fight back against the lobbyists that are controlling all the MPPs and making them do their bidding with fear of retribution for speaking out.
Thank you, Jim. Before we go on to our next question, I will mention the election, of course, is on February the 27th. Some people aren't going to be here for that date. I'm not going to be here to vote that date. I'm heading out to vote in advance polls right after this debate. So for you out there, know that the advance polls are open right now until February the 26th. I'll remind you at the end of this show again, elections.on.ca to find your advance voting location. All right, our next topic, and I'll start with you on this, Braden, is affordable housing. Will you push for increased provincial funding for more supportive housing projects in Kitchener-Conestoga?
Yes, as I said earlier, the great part about the Green Party is they have put forward a platform and they have laid out budgets and solutions to a lot of these questions. They've gone above and beyond in their housing plan in terms of not only going and figuring out a way to build the houses required across Ontario, but going beyond that to figure out a way to build even more houses. As well as this morning, they announced their plans in more laws around rent control and making sure that people aren't being rent-evicted from their homes, which is happening all over the place. In terms of Kitchener-Conestoga as well, we have ample opportunity and ample land out here that isn't farmland to build up housing options, but the main issue is, as always, there's only one kind of housing that's being built, and it's not for you and me.
And Joe, on the topic of affordable housing.
Depends on which angle you take this. Is it the social side or the other, actually being able to afford a house? And one of the things that I'm looking at from my finance background, I sat on many development projects, and the minimum for a single detached home was $950,000, no upgrades. Who can afford that? The average person would not be able to afford that. Just ticking a box at sitting in Queen's Park, ticking a box, yep, we're building homes, we're building homes. We are not building the right homes. We need to make sure that the homes that we are building are affordable. I have 2 grown girls that are finishing college. They are not going to buy a house. They will not be able to afford it. And that's one of the reasons that I put my name forward is to make sure that their future is bright when it comes to buying a home. On the social side of things, I grew up in social housing. We need more of it. If I wasn't able to live in a home, I don't know where I would be today.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, will you push for increased provincial funding for more supportive housing projects?
The reckless spending of Doug Ford's PC government means that we don't have any money to spend more on social programs. We thought that Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne had reckless spending, and Doug Ford came in promising that he was going to balance the budget, which would allow us to spend more on social programs in the future. Instead, Doug Ford and the PCs have spent more than Kathleen Wynne did, and that's outside of COVID relief spending. It's unbelievable. Even conservative outfits like the Fraser Institute have stated that Doug Ford is outspending Kathleen Wynne. And what does that mean? That means that social programs are going to be the first ones to be impacted because our economy is not growing the way it needs to grow, and government is deeply in debt, and it's going to take years for us to climb out of it until we can afford big investments and larger investments in social programs like affordable housing.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody.
Supportive housing needs partnerships. We need to work with cooperatives and not-for-profits and use some of our public land that we already have and build homes that people can actually afford so that they can start getting that leg up and start saving money. I have a 24-year-old who has recently moved home to save money so that he can hopefully one day buy a house. It's not like it was when my husband and I got married almost 28 years ago and bought a house for $100,000 in Kitchener. Even when we moved to Wellesley, our house was very affordable. I would say we couldn't afford to buy a home in our neighborhood today. And some of the largest growing homeless populations are seniors because they're getting rent evicted, or their rents are rising too quickly, or they just can't afford to downsize because it's actually becoming more expensive. And so for those first-time home buyers, for those fixed income folks, we need housing that they can actually afford, and the Ontario NDP is going to build it.
Thank you, Jody. We'll stay with affordable housing right now, and we'll talk about rent evictions. I heard rent evictions mentioned there. Rent evictions, for those that don't know what that term means watching, where landlords evict tenants under the guise of renovations to raise rents. It's obviously a growing issue here in Ontario. A 2021 bill, Bill 58, the Rent Stabilization Act, aimed to curb this practice but failed to pass. So I'll start with you on this, Joe. Would you support similar Ontario legislation, and how would you work to protect tenants?
Absolutely. What I would do is definitely support the bill, because rent evictions, actually my sister was involved in that, and it's personal to me right now, trying to get that figured out and sorted out. There's a backlog at the Landlord and Tenant Board. 53,000 cases still need to be done. One of the things that we have put forward is we are going to clear that backlog when it comes to the Landlord and Tenant Board. We're also going to make rent more affordable by phasing in rent control, which is going to resolve the disputes that the landlords and tenants have, because a lot of the times is they can't afford the rents that are being proposed. So we need to phase in, back in, I should say, because the Ford government did take it away that we had in place, back in the rent controls, more towards the example of Manitoba that has rent controls in place right now.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, rent evictions.
I'm a lawyer who litigates, and I defend, tenants or even employees who are being taken advantage of by landlords, or in the employee context, an employer, very similar dynamic to a landlord-tenant. And we have to make sure that access to justice is there and that the laws are being respected by landlords in the way they treat their tenants. But when it comes to this specific issue, I think the number one way to combat it is to give people many options in places where they live, and a long-term option of owning the home where they live. So they can't ever get removed by a landlord. And we have to work towards making housing affordable, both in terms of rent, but also, more importantly, bring back that long-term dream that my parents had when they moved here in Ontario of owning your own home, whether it's a home, whether it's a condo, and so you can be the master of your own house.
And Jody, how would you work to protect tenants?
I don't think we have time to wait to phase in rent control. I was speaking with a woman knocking on doors last week whose granddaughter called her in tears because her landlord just came along and said, you need to pay me $1,000 more a month. That is not okay. We have not had real rent control. The Ontario NDP has been fighting for it, and we will make sure that it does come in and it is enforced. With rent evictions, we're going to use fines so that it's a deterrent, so that landlords aren't using these rent evictions and demo evictions. And I think that we need to look at some of these big corporations who are purchasing the buildings and renting them out with the purpose of making profits for stockholders. I think that that is keeping it out of touch because they're more worried about profits than making sure that people have a roof over their heads.
Thank you, Jody and Braden.
As I said before, the Green Party of Ontario, they already have a plan. They've had a plan. This morning, we announced more steps we were taking. Ashton Clancy has put forward already a bill to curb a lot of these issues. The problem was already stated. It's not an issue of solutions not existing. It's an issue of them being voted down. And this is because the wrong people are being put in these places under the guise that they're there to represent you and under the guise that they're there to fix these problems. But when they get into these positions, they're doing everything but finding a real solution. There's things you can throw around as potential solutions or phased approaches or however you want to say it, but even the organizations that exist, the home builders associations, they're ready. There's people that exist that are building concrete homes in our region for a few $100,000 all said and done. These things exist. Our current government just doesn't want anything to do with it.
Thank you, Braden. We will move on to our next questions, plural, which will be under the topic of homelessness and encampments. And Jim, I'll start with you first. According to a point-in-time count conducted by regional staff and community organizations, the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in Waterloo Region has doubled since 2021. What would your party do to aim to reverse this trend?
There's two primary things that we've been fighting for even when my wife Belinda was an MPP. Number one, affordability, to make people be able to afford a home of their own, like I said earlier. The PCs have not provided any tax relief. They've done nothing with the rising cost of living. They're spending beyond our government means, and they're making life less and less affordable in Ontario with fewer and fewer high-paying jobs. All of that contributes to the homelessness crisis that we're seeing. Secondly, we continue to be opposed, the only party that's opposed to drug injection sites in our communities. Anywhere we've seen drug injection sites be introduced in communities, the homelessness problem has gone up. It hasn't solved it, and we continue to be against it. My wife faced heavy retribution at Queen's Park and in the media for that position, but we were on the right side of that issue, and we've seen local governments now step back from that advocacy.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody, what would the Liberal Party do to aim to reverse this trend? I'm sorry, the NDP party. My apologies.
No problem. First of all, the fact that we've had so many homeless people and that Doug Ford has said to municipal governments, get rid of them with no plan to do so, just shows the lack of caring for the people. So I think we need to stop downloading a lot of these responsibilities onto municipalities, and we need to come up with a plan. So the NDP plans to build supportive housing that actually has supports built in to help with mental health issues, to help with addiction issues. If we help folks get healthy and make sure that they can have food in their bellies, help them learn how to budget, make sure there's a roof over their head, they can then come back and contribute to society. And they want to. No one wants to be sleeping in a tent in this freezing cold weather with the snow. And so we really need to build those supports to help folks and help them get back on their feet.
Thank you, Jody. And Braden, what would you do to aim to reverse this trend?
Another great thing I'd like to try to let people know about, and I think that there's really great people at the Green Party right now that are doing a better job in terms of messaging, but the Green Party's approach to a lot of these problems is a holistic approach. That's what they mean when they talk about sustainability. And that's how you have to approach this. It's not just about building houses that can facilitate these people. It's about the entire approach of building not only houses, but that support system along with those houses so that these people are not only getting a roof over their heads, but getting what they need to get out of this situation and to make progress and have some sort of upward mobility. And don't get it twisted, no matter what any other party says in terms of this idea, at the end of the day, the cost of living needs to come down so that everyone, no matter the job they work, minimum wage or otherwise, can afford to live, have a roof over their head, and the things they need to survive.
Thank you, Braden. And Joe, I'll pose the same question to you.
Absolutely. So Braden touched on it. Cost of living is major right now. And one of the things that I want to put forward is more of a cost-based approach. So we need to have, it's more on supply and demand, excuse me, that's where I was going with that. Supply and demand is a huge thing. If we have more people out there that are buying for, like there's more grocery stores. Right now we have 2 grocery stores that are telling us what we need to pay for cabbage. And honestly, it should be based on how much that person is going to sell it for. We're going to double our ODSP payments to everybody that is on ODSP. That's 500,000 people rely on that each year, and it's a tragedy with that. One of the things that I want to put forward is to go back on one policy that the last Liberal government had was a pilot on a basic income. I want to revisit that and see how that goes.
Thank you, Joe. Continuing in the same topic, and I will acknowledge that this is a 2, perhaps even a 3-part question, and apologies that you only have 1 minute to answer this. Jody, you'll be first. Do you support the forced removal of encampment residents, and do you believe temporary designated encampment sites with sanitation and support services should be explored? And if not, do you have other suggestions?
I do not believe in forcing a bunch of people at once unless we have a solid plan to help them. I think we've seen too many times where we're taking big machinery, which can be very scary, and trying to plow through tents and putting them in places that they don't feel safe in. And so I think it's a matter of going on the ground, talking to the people who are working with homeless people, actually talking to the homeless people themselves, and building a solution that works for them, so that they're not going back into the encampments, so that they feel safe, so that they feel supported, and so that they can start making steps to stay out of a tent city and encampment.
And Braden.
Yeah, I mean, I agree entirely. At the end of the day, these people are people. They are you and me. They are people that have fallen on hard times. The only reason I was lucky enough to not be in a similar situation is because I was able to lean on things like debt. The fact that the average Canadian spends upwards of 110% of their income to just get by is absurd. The fact that we rely on debt so often to just get by day to day. So obviously, how is somebody without a support system, without any sort of means in terms of getting wealth and being able to build on what they own and their ability to function in society, how are they supposed to get out of these situations? I think that focusing on a plan to rehouse and building it and making sure it's ready to go before we just start saying they all need to leave where they are, and making sure that we're doing it in a humane way.
Thank you, Braden. And Joe.
When I ran for regional council in 2022, I went out to the encampments and talked to a lot of the residents that are there, and there is some that want to be there. There are some that have jobs that want to be there because it's free. The problem being is we don't have anywhere to go. The regional government took a stance on we're going to sue them. We're going to make it illegal. The PC government themselves said they want to make homeless illegal. It's absurd. It's absurd. You don't have anywhere for those people to go. And what we are going to propose is that we need to build the affordable housing. We need to work with the local municipalities to make sure that we have spaces for them to go, because the courts themselves said you can't remove those people until you have beds for them to go into.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim, final word on this, I'll ask you.
There shouldn't be an encampment because police should be enforcing the laws from the beginning, not waiting until it gets out of hand, where the only measure left is to force cleaning out of an encampment that's been developed or created over weeks and weeks. The humane way to do it is to prevent that encampment from getting set up in the first place and finding that person shelter as soon as possible. I find it shocking that the police, someone's telling the police not to ensure that the encampment doesn't get set up in the beginning, only to come in at the end and force it out. The other thing I'll talk about is this is closely linked to the fentanyl crisis that we have in Ontario. And my wife stood up in the legislature when she was an MPP and asked the Ford PC government what they're doing to force the federal government, Justin Trudeau at the time, to get serious about border control and fentanyl coming into Ontario. And they laughed at her. And now it took Donald Trump for the federal and provincial governments to get serious about border control.
Thank you, Jim. I think we have time for one more question before we go on to our closing statements. So my final question for you, and I'll begin with Braden on this one, is regarding our LGBTQIA2S+ community. And I ask you, how will you ensure that Kitchener-Conestoga is a safe and inclusive space for all of your constituents, including members of the LGBTQIA2S+ community?
I'll start by saying that they are all Canadians. They're all people. Trans people are people. The New Blue candidate actually gave a great example of what a lot of governments have been doing in terms of bringing up topics that barely impact the majority of Canadians and focusing all their time, energy, and money into these things, and then allowing social concepts, allowing things that barely impact Canadians, like some sort of boogeyman that exists within these communities, to cause stirs and to take away the government's time and resources. The truth of the matter is there's a simple solution to the majority of these problems, and it's about the government doing their job as a civil servant, serving the people and giving people the ability to have upward social and economic mobility, no matter what they identify as, no matter who they are. It's ridiculous to even have to talk about these things.
Thank you, Braden. Same question for you, Joe.
Absolutely. When I was a trustee for the school board, one of the things was inclusivity, and they really pushed that when I was on the board there. I will continue to do that. And one of the things is education. I know that some people on the panel will disagree that that should be taught in school, and they have their that's why we're up here. Everybody has their different views. But for anyone to get past their hate, you have to know what's out there. If people want to get past their hate, you got to teach them that it's not right to hate. It's not right to hate. Let people be who they are. Let people love who they love, because everybody is a person.
Thank you, Joe. And Jim.
I think Joe was talking about me, so I'm just going to take it as that. And I think he's got the New Blue Party and me personally mixed up. It starts with respecting the dignity of all human life, and it starts from conception to natural death. And that's what the New Blue Party stands for. But what I won't do in respecting individuals is trampling on parental rights. And there's two fundamental ways that I think Joe and I disagree. Number one, teaching to young children sensitive topics without parental authority is not something the New Blue stands for. Maybe the Liberals, maybe the NDP stand for that. We don't stand for that. And number two, giving parents the option on these sensitive topics as to whether they want their students to learn it at school or whether they want to teach their children about respecting all human life, because they are the first and primary caregivers of their children and the first and primary teachers of their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody, I'll just clarify the question again before I ask your answer. How will you ensure that Kitchener-Conestoga is a safe and inclusive space for all constituents, including members of the LGBTQ community?
We have seen hate-based crimes in Waterloo region increase, and Kitchener-Conestoga is no different. I was talking to a friend today who was talking about how her house was egged. I've had stories of folks in Wilmot whose children have been not included in things, and I consider myself an ally. This hurts me every single time to hear about the way that we are treating other human beings. When I was the president of the parent council at Waterloo Oxford, there was a school sanctioned event that actually didn't include anyone and actually outed gay and trans kids. And I fought for that activity to finish, to end forever. It didn't belong in the schools, and managed to make that happen. And I will continue to do those things so that everyone is treated fairly and properly, and just let's treat each other with respect.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you to the four of you for your answers. All right, just enough time for closing statements, and we are back in left to right order again. So closing statements, we'll begin with Joe.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank Rogers and Sean for hosting this. We are at a crossroads. We need change within Kitchener-Conestoga. There is healthcare, there is the Wilmot land grab, there is education. Our current voice is not in Queen's Park. Queen's Park's voice is in our riding. I will be your voice in Queen's Park. We have to find a balance when it comes to financial responsibility with our funds, when it comes from taxpayers. A lot of the parties have their spending that they want to do. If you add up a lot of the NDP spending, for instance, they're going to have to increase taxes by 30%. That's income taxes by 30% to be able to plan for all of theirs. The Liberal Party is going to cut through taxes. We are going to make sure that life is more affordable. We are going to build the right type of homes, and we're going to make sure that there is a home for everybody to stay in.
Thank you, Joe. And closing statements from Jim Carahalios.
I was born to working class parents who chose to come to Ontario because they believed it was the best place for a better tomorrow. They chose Ontario because it was a place where hard work was rewarded, a handshake was worth as much as a contract, where government respected property rights and encouraged their citizens to have maximum benefit of the fruits of their own labor, and where the rules were applied the same to everyone and not based on whether you had a friend in the Premier's office. Those are the values, some of the values I was raised with. And those are the values that I believe most Ontarians still believe in. Unfortunately, those aren't the values that the lobbyists and the political cronies at Queen's Park believe in. In fact, those are the values they sneer at, they ridicule, and they deride. The New Blue Party was formed to clean house and to stand up for those grassroots values and to be a political home to Ontarians who fundamentally still believe the best is yet to come. On February 27th, vote New Blue.
Thank you, Jim. And Jody.
I agree that Ontario was once seen as the province that was full of opportunity. And I don't think any of us feel like that. It started with the Liberals with cuts in healthcare, where they'd have over 1,000 hallway healthcare happening in 2018. Ford has made that even worse. Education cuts have continued to happen. I work in post-secondary, and our post-secondary institutions right now have huge deficits and are probably going to have to start laying off people soon. We're not investing in our future, and we're not investing in the everyday people. We need to make sure that we're building homes that people can live in, or make sure that rent is affordable. We need to make sure that people can afford their groceries. We need to make sure that there's still a little money left at the end of the day for that rainy day, whatever that happens to be for you, whether it's travel or a home or retirement. And we don't have that today.
Thank you, Jody. And final closing statement from Braden.
The older you are, the longer you've spent time in Ontario. I think a lot of the messaging, especially from the main two parties, sounds like a broken record that's just on repeat for decades, where it's the same issues, the same solutions, and yet here we are. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of fundamental problems with our system that leads to the majority of these issues still existing to this day. The people that need to be in these positions are people that are willing to try something different, are willing to actually make tangible change, and most importantly, are going to be transparent about how tax dollars are spent, where your money is going, the timelines of these solutions, and what they won't tell you when they say, you know, oh, do you want to be like a Scandinavian country paying 60% tax? What they won't tell you is not only are they happy to pay that because their system works for them, but their 40% that's left over goes way further than what's left over for us.
Thank you, Braden. Once again, thank you to all four of our candidates, Joe Gowing, Jim Carahalios, Jody Szymanski, and Braden Wagner, 4 of the 6 candidates you will see on your ballot in Kitchener-Conestoga. Thanks to our volunteers who made the local campaign happen today, along with our producer, David Aguiar. My name has been Sean Ferfaro, and I am encouraging you to get out and vote. If you can't get out on the 27th, go to elections.on.ca to find your advance polls.